what does risk mean? How can we take risk principles into producing legislation?
The whole discussion about regulatory policy in Europe is getting more and more politicized. We need to go back to basically to the sort of science basis of it. We need to have a broader discussion on it. We need to understand where are the decisions coming from and why. What's the reasoning behind them?
We need to talk about both risk and precaution, both about science and norms. When we have a lot of data and knowledge, and when we have a consensus about objectives in society, decisions can be made by scientists and regulators quite rationally. When we have huge uncertainty, which is the case for many chemical substances, we need precautionary policies. And on top of that, if we not only have scientific uncertainty but also controversies and trade-off tensions in society, I would say that we also need to bring deliberative public participatory policies into the process.
There are occasions where the precautionary principle is really the right approach to use, and that is where you don't know what the risk is, but the potential cost could be very, very great, either to individuals or an economy. The thing about the precautionary principle is that sitting behind that is a belief that you can't make a proper risk assessment because you simply don't have the information and the risk might be very great. But for most risks you can make a pretty good stab at what through assessment at what the likely risk is going to be, and therefore decide on an outcome you want and the proper course of action which is going to lead to that outcome.
It's really important always to take on board the scientific evidence, to get the best scientific availability evidence, to take the best analysis, the best judgment and so on. However, that's only one part of policy making. I always say to people that policy making also takes into account individuals' choices, culture, religion, what they want to do. So I think being clear about when you're disregarding the scientific evidence or where you're accepting it, that's really quite important.
Clearly the precautionary principle and as a risk management tool, no one disagreed with that. And in fact what we need to now do is fully integrate the precautionary principle within the risk management apparatus and not leave it as some other discretionary tool outside of normal scrutiny, outside of normal decision making. It's part of decision making, and I think that needs to be something which the Commission needs to bring into its review of its impact assessment and regulatory procedures, and we hope to see that happening in the next year or so.
I think we did agree at this conference that up-to-date science is absolutely key. It's not the be-all and end-all. There are obviously other factors too that come into play, but understanding science and what it can tell us about how chemicals work, whether in the body or the environment, is absolutely critical.
Should a similar event happen again? Should it become part of the landscape on an annual basis or something of that nature? Personally, I think it might be very helpful to develop the dialogue, perhaps produce a detailed paper on the findings from the Dublin meeting, and then make a determination of whether we should have a meeting again in a year or 18 months' time, and that could be very helpful to the whole European project.